Greetings! Welcome to the Week 12 Early Access Update for Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades. We're going to start off, as always, with a quick sound check. Make sure your speakers aren't up too high. Wonderful. So we've got some very important new stuff this week. Not so much new toys in the form of guns, but new toys in the form of a massive underlying system rewrite that comes with it a whole bunch of advancements and the groundwork for future editions. So the first of which we're going to cover is the new Touchpad Menu, which I'm going to pull up here. Note that it doesn't instantaneously pop up anymore. You have to hold it for about a quarter second or so. Wonderful. So we've got a new touchpad menu that has iconographic symbols instead of text, especially just because, well, text doesn't work very well at VR resolutions unless it's large or it's really up close. And the touchpad menu is now sort of multi-stage in that we have on the first menu that pops up here, we have the two things you're going to want to do most commonly, i.e. teleport and retrieve an object to your hand. This can now be done, all of the sort of touchpad options here, in addition to pulling the trigger, as before, you can also just click down on that quadrant of the touchpad. Then, if we hit the ellipsis up here, we have the three options that are useful, but we don't necessarily want to put one button click away from accidentally hitting. And those are returning to the main menu, resetting the current scene that you're in, and a brand new one, which is pulling up the options panel. I'm going to do that right now. Boom! Options panel. This is an object like any other in that I can just drop it and pick it back up. I can exchange it. The grab point for it goes all the way around it, as though you were holding a tablet. And this week we have basically two categories of options online already. We have Locomotion Options, which I'll cover in a moment, and some input options. Cool, so let's go over the new input options first, as it's the quickest. The first of them is, instead of having just in the indoor range those couple handguns, where I've been experimenting with a new magazine position to make things easier for you, you can enable basically whatever the current experiment is for making that better right here with Use Alternate Handgun Magazine Pose. So if I set this down momentarily, pop out a magazine, you'll see that its pose is like so. And if I hit yes here, you'll now see that the magazine comes out of basically around where the palm of your hand is, which might work better for you. I'm still not 100% set on the angle. It might be that it would work better being just a little bit more forward, but give this a shot for this week. There's also a second experiment, which I'm way less sure of, but I think is worth testing, which you can see here as Use Experimental Handgun Mag Aiming, which we're going to turn on. Which what this does basically is when you have a matching firearm in your hand, and it's only for the handguns, it will lerp the rotation of the magazine to the handgun to attempt to line it up, so that you can be holding the magazine. You can have this hand essentially at any rotation and still have it be able to line up with the handgun. Still doesn't work how I want it to, but I'm getting closer to something that I like. So feel free to give that a shot. If you want to try that mode, make sure that both of these are set to yes. Let's see, what else do we got here? I'm going to pop those back to no. We have always use damped two-hand recoil. This is an option primarily for those of you who are playing with a sort of a gun rig on your Vive controller. I know that in a lot of cases, based on how your rig might be set up, actually holding the foregrip the whole time for stabilizing the rifle may make it, you might not be able to plug in that forward controller. It might just not work well. So what you can do is simply turn this on, and all two-handed weapons will fire recoil-wise as though that foregrip is being held. Let's see. And then lastly, this is both a sort of accessibility option and is in response to some folk who actually do a good amount of target shooting who complain about how easy it is by squeezing the Vive controller, accidentally dropping their gun. And so these are alternate options for the grip button object drop style. So we can set this, instead of being instant, to a 1 second hold. So I'm going to click this, and then it drops. Or we can set that to a double click drop. Wonderful. So hopefully that should be useful to some of you. Now on to the meat of things. Let's jump over to Locomotion Options. As many of you probably saw in my little teaser video this week, I've added options for locomotion that aren't just teleporting. So by default, we can teleport, at least in the breaching and the obstacle course, the sort of arena scene. We can either teleport with the touchpad here, or we can teleport via the sort of gaze-based system, where I look in a direction, I hold down the button that's above the touchpad, like so, and I hold that button down and sort of charge up a node, and then jump to it. Now, a number of you have been asking for some other option for this, and while I've generally been a little reticent to do it because of how nauseous it can make some, and frankly put, because we don't actually know which forms of sort of sliding locomotion really work best in terms of minimizing those effects, I've decided to sort of take a maximalist approach to it and give you a whole bunch of options to tune it for what's comfortable for you, if any of them are comfortable at all. So you can enable what's called teleport sliding on either the touchpad or the gaze teleport independently. So if I enable this for the touchpad teleport, a whole bunch more settings here become relevant. So I can choose the acceleration type. Do I want it to be an instantaneous start and instantaneous stop, like so? Boom. Do I want it to be softly accelerated and decelerated? Or do I want it to be sharply accelerated and decelerated? This is a really sharp one, but it still is a little more gradual than no acceleration. I personally find no acceleration to be more comfortable, but some folk have a totally opposite experience of that, so I wanted that to be present. Next up, you can actually tune essentially your run and your sneak speed. And the difference between these is, especially for those who want to have a more tactical experience in the breaching scene, you can set two speeds, the slowest of which will cut off when your head goes below a certain local height of the controller, which you can also set here to be in between 0.8 and 1.2 meters based on your height and, how low you actually want to get to the ground. So I definitely recommend, if you're not quite sure if these sorts of things make you nauseous, start slow and start simple. Having a very, very low speed and having your acceleration type set to none. This is a very, very gentle speed. And that should give you a notion of whether this is something that your tummy can handle. I also recommend, if you're trying these out for the first time and you haven't done sliding motion in VR and you're not sure, only do it for a couple minutes and then take the headset off, give yourself a break, let yourself adjust to this. So yeah, so let's go ahead and turn all these on. Oh, and one last option, does Gaze Teleport auto confirm? In the current setup, when you Gaze Teleport and hold the button, it sort of charges up the node and then initiates the teleport when you release the button. If you want it to work differently than that, you can just hit yes here, and what it will do is it will just complete the teleport as soon as that node is charged up. Or if you have sliding enabled, initiate the slide as soon as the node completes. Also note that you do have an indicator for where you are when sliding is active and where you're going to end up. It takes into account your local offset within your volume. So yeah, set those all to no. Also, I implemented this week, these settings are actually being saved globally, so definitely it should work. I've tested on a couple of machines, but if something glitches out, please let me know. It's the first time I've actually added any sort of persistent data into the game of any kind. And then lastly, this week, the other system that got a major upgrade, essentially because of the fact that I wanted to rebuild the hitbox system for the arena and the breaching scene fighting Clunk, is I rebuilt the player body, and in so doing ended up finding a way to make the torso position relative to the head, which is effectively a giant guess because we only have head sensor data, work a little bit better. So if we look down at our quick belts here, you'll first notice that as we rotate our head left and right, the quick belts do still rotate a little bit, but it's way less instantaneous and severe than it was before. Before, when you look down and say, look over to your hip, they would spin like 30 degrees or so. So that's been fixed. In addition to that, their overall height and sort of forward projection relative to the head is way more consistent. It's never going to be perfect because we don't have a tracking position for your sternum, but I spent like 3 days just working on this, and I'm really happy with how it works. Lastly, I have increased the size of the sort of two major hip points, primarily to really facilitate being able to blind draw from your hip. So basically, if you're an average height individual, when you place your hand about where your pocket is, your hand should be inside that quick belt slot. If it's not, let me know, and I'll add some sort of options for being able to tune that height a little bit. In addition, the system has, I haven't added alternates yet, but I constructed the system that will eventually allow you to have different sorts of quick belt configurations based on various presets. So if you want something more asymmetric or something ridiculous, or possibly even having one underneath each controller as a sort of wrist slot, that's now, the baseline of that is in, and within the next couple weeks, I'll actually have some options there for you. So give it a shot. I find it's much more reliable to quick draw, especially from these slots. So yeah, hope you have fun with it.
Yo! So this was a bit of a scary week work-wise. The process of putting in the global options and really rebuilding the entire rig and prefab for the player's body, the way the hands worked because of the new touchpad system was a little bit scary, precisely because I had to break absolutely everything. There was about a 2-day period where I couldn't even hit play in Unity because it would just, it would spew like 60 errors. That just because there were, everything was basically completely disassembled to be able to rewrite things and reassemble them. So I'm super glad it went back together, because it was about Tuesday night, maybe Wednesday morning, I was beginning to have a few like, oh goodness, am I gonna get it working again for Friday? But I managed to, so yay! So for everything that's visible to the end user in this update, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is invisible, but is sort of baseline work for future options, future features, etc. Essentially, this week I made the whole project way more consistent, way less brittle, and way more expandable for the future. I have the groundwork for at least 5 more sort of options categories. Some of them, the sort of standard stuff you expect in a game like audio options, and some of them, to accommodate the international audience, there'll be options for changing whether you want everything in feet or everything in meters in terms of ranges and sort of dialogues on the holo sites. Incidentally, I think I fixed the bug that was occurring with menu text disappearing in the main menu scene that was related to an irritating, just infuriating error related to font cache texturing that I'm convinced is the fault of the guy who made the plugin for Unity NGUI, who then went on to write a whole bunch of Unity's new GUI system. If you're a Unity developer and you're using a single font, make sure you're not using a whole bunch of different sizes of it or have it set to dynamic or best fit, because it will just run out of space on that font cache texture and silently error. And thankfully a member in our community actually took the time to download RenderDoc after he came up with a repro for the issue and managed to find the problem and the error for us, after which it was like, it was a 15-minute fix, but I had no idea what was causing it. I couldn't even repro it for some reason. But thankfully that's been fixed. Clunk also got a minor upgrade this week. There was a major performance issue that some of you might have suffered in the breaching scene that just relates to a chaotic interaction of like physics trigger collision, and the way that I'm moving the player around. Basically, if you had items in your quick belt and there were multiple robots facing you and you were moving via a handheld mount, the whole game would start to judder. And I've eliminated that bug by basically rewriting all of Clunk's sensors. It's made it between 100 and several thousand times faster, based on the given situation. I don't even see it in the profiler anymore, and so there should all of that judder should be gone. Let's see what else. Let me look at my notes here. Yeah, the player hitboxes should be way more accurate now, and before they were doing, I coded them very fast last week, so they were tracking number of hits individually, which means you could say get 2 hits in your head and then 3 hits in your body, be reset, go out and fight again, take 1 more hit to your head and immediately get reset. So that's been fixed. You have 5 hits total now, and after taking 5 hits you get teleport reset. I'll eventually do something more fancy or dramatic with that, but it's serviceable for now. So yeah, so that's it for this week. For over the coming week, well, there's a particularly thematically appropriate holiday for the U.S. coming up, so I'm going to be doing something along that lines, along with a couple thematically appropriate long time requests for this coming week's updates. So the next one won't just be boring option stuff, but it'll be some really fun toys to play with. And then after this coming week's update, I'm probably going to take a week off, as I've done 12 of these straight, including through illness, and I definitely need a 1 week sanity break. So I hope you guys have fun. Please give the new Locomotion Options a try. If you know you're super nauseous with sliding motion, don't feel pressured to. Everything's disabled by default. It should never turn on accidentally. So if you're, and the way that I intend to use those Locomotion Options in terms of game balance and designing scenarios is to always be accommodating whatever can be active in the scene. So suffice it to say that I'm going to make sure that sort of both approaches are always kept in my head as I'm designing things to try to accommodate the plurality of the audience. So, hope you all have fun. See you next week. Peace.